Hello, students. Have you ever looked around and wondered why some people have so much while others have so little? Well, in the 19th century, this very question sparked a revolution, not of guns, but of ideas, right across Europe. Today, we're going to explore those powerful ideas and meet the thinkers who introduced the world to something new: socialism. So, here is our plan for today. First, we will step back in time into the difficult world of 19th century industrial Europe to understand why new ideas were so desperately needed. Then, we will meet some of the first socialist dreamers, people like Owen and Blanc, before we dive into the very radical theories of Karl Marx. And finally, we'll see how these powerful ideas started to take root and really begin to change the world. You see, to truly understand an idea like socialism, we first have to understand the world it was born into. This was a time of incredible change, yes, but for many ordinary people, it was also a time of incredible difficulty and hardship. I want you to look closely at this drawing. This is from the 1860s. This isn't just a picture. It's like a window into the past, into the life of the poor in a big city like London. You can almost feel how crowded the streets are, how difficult the conditions must have been. This was the everyday reality for millions of people during the Industrial Revolution. Just try to imagine this life for a moment. You would work for 12, maybe even 15 hours every single day. The wages you earned could barely feed your family, and you lived with the constant fear of losing your job. After that long, tiring day, you would come home to a single, small room, often shared with many others, in a building with no proper toilets or clean water. This was the life for men, women, and even very young children. Now, when you're faced with all of these problems, it is no surprise that people started to think, surely there has to be a better way to live. And this search for a fairer society gave birth to a very powerful new set of ideas. The central idea that connected all these new thinkers was called socialism. They looked at the big factories and the vast lands owned by just a few wealthy people, and they said, this is the problem. They argued that the system of private property itself was the real cause of all this inequality and suffering. So what was their solution? They believed that property, like factories and land, should not be owned by private individuals for their own profit, but should be controlled by society as a whole for the benefit of everyone. That was the big question, wasn't it? It's one thing to see a problem, but it is quite another thing to find a solution that actually works. And it's very important for us to understand that different socialists had very, very different answers to this question. Let's look at some of the first visions that they proposed. We will begin with two of the earliest socialist thinkers. They did not call for violence or for revolution. Instead, they dreamt of a new world that could be built on cooperation, not on competition. Let's start with a really fascinating man, Robert Owen. What might surprise you is that he was a wealthy factory owner himself, so he saw the harsh life of the workers with his own eyes. He believed that the constant fight for profit was making society selfish. So you know what he did? He decided to build a better world with his own money. He went to America and started a community called New Harmony. Just imagine a village where everyone worked together, in the workshops and in the fields. And instead of one owner keeping all the profit, the benefits were shared among everyone who did the work. It was a beautiful, hopeful dream. But here, we come to a big problem. The experiment at New Harmony was a wonderful idea, but it was just one small community in a very big industrial world. How could one person, or even one small group of people, change the economic system of an entire country? It was very, very difficult to build these communities on a large scale. And this reality made other thinkers believe that for real, big change to happen, a more powerful force was needed. And this brings us to another important thinker, a Frenchman named Louis Blanc. You see, while Robert Owen believed in what individuals could achieve on their own, Louis Blanc had a different idea. He argued that the government must step in. He wanted governments to actively encourage and support cooperatives so that over time they could replace the privately owned businesses. He imagined special workshops supported by the state where workers would produce things together and the profits would be divided fairly among them. Now, the ideas of Owen and Blanc were about changing society peacefully through cooperation. But the thinkers we are about to meet next, Karl Marx and his friend Friedrich Engels, well, they had a much, much more radical vision. Let's look at how Marx saw the world. He argued that industrial society was fundamentally divided into two groups, two classes, that were always in conflict. On one side, you had the capitalists. These were the owners of the factories, the machines, and the money.
And on the other side, you had the workers. According to Marx, it was the workers who created all the value with their labor, but all the profit went to the capitalists, while the workers' own conditions never improved. So for Marx, this system was not just unfair, it was a system of exploitation, and he did not believe it could be fixed with a few cooperative experiments here and there. In his view, the only way for workers to be truly free was for them to rise up and completely overthrow the entire system of capitalism and private property. So what would replace capitalism? Marx's theory was that this great conflict between workers and capitalists would eventually lead to a revolution. And out of this revolution, a new society would be born, a society he called a communist society. In this new world, all property, the factories, the land, everything would be controlled by society as a whole. And in such a society, he believed, workers would finally be free from exploitation.
Let's just pause here for a moment and think about this. The early socialists like Owen and Blanc wanted to build a new world based on cooperation, working either by themselves or with help from the government. Marx's idea is completely different. He is not talking about cooperation. He is talking about conflict, about revolution. This is a very important difference to understand. Now, these powerful ideas, especially the ideas of Marx, did not just stay inside books. They spread like wildfire across Europe. They inspired workers everywhere to organize, to stand up for their rights, and to demand change. Theory was now turning into action.
All across Europe, towards the end of the 19th century, workers began to organize themselves. They formed associations to fight for better pay and safer working conditions. And then they took the next logical step. They formed their own political parties. In Germany, the Social Democratic Party, or SPD, started to win seats in the parliament. By 1905, Britain had its own Labour Party, and France had a Socialist Party too. For the very first time, workers had a real voice in government. And sometimes, these ideas led to more than just votes. They led to actual uprisings. One of the most famous examples of this is the Paris Commune of 1871. For a few amazing weeks, ordinary workers and activists took control of the city of Paris. They tried to run it themselves as a kind of people's government. Now, it was eventually and brutally crushed. But for socialists all over the world, the Paris Commune became a powerful and heroic symbol of what a future workers' revolution could look like. So, we have seen how a very powerful set of ideas grew out of the hardships of the industrial age. Let's just take a moment to quickly recap the key visions that we have explored today. So for our revision, remember, we have met three key thinkers, each with a different vision for change. First, there was Robert Owen, who believed in individual initiative to build cooperative communities. Then we had Louis Blanc, who argued that the state, the government, must intervene to support those cooperatives. And finally, there was Karl Marx, who called for a workers' revolution to overthrow capitalism and create a communist society. The most crucial point to take away from our discussion today is this. These were not just abstract theories written in books. These ideas about a fairer, more equal world captured the imagination of millions of people. And in doing so, they prepared the ground. They laid the foundation for some of the most dramatic revolutions and political changes the world has ever seen. And that sets up our next topic perfectly. All of this thinking, all of this organizing, it was all building up to something massive. In our next explainer, we will see how these very ideas led to a revolution that would not only change a country, but would shape the history of the entire 20th century. Thank you for joining me.